Time to open the meeting at 6 o'clock. I'll ask for a motion to open the meeting.
Motion that we open the meeting?
Say the motion made and seconded.
Second.
All right. And all members will vote to open the meeting. Lara?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, this meeting is now officially open. We're going to have a public hearing on this. Prior to we starting the meeting, I'm going to read an opening statement, and then we'll get down to some ground rules, and then we'll go forward with the public meeting. Today is February 24th, 2026. The time is 6 o'clock. Meeting of the Board of Health is now called to order. My name is Glenn French. I am the chairman for the Board of Health. This open meeting of the Northborough Board of Health is being conducted in person and remotely, consistent with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025 relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. Public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream or the recording of this meeting may do so by going to the Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will actually feature public comment, and with regards to that, what we're going to do is read this. Public hearing is to discuss proposed regulations regarding the keeping of chickens in the town of Northborough. Copies of the proposed regulation are available tonight, and they have been online. I think that's a stack of them there on the table. It's the duty of the Board of Health to promote and protect the public health of the residents of Northborough. The board derives its legal authority to enact regulations from the Massachusetts legislature. Except for Title V regulations, is not legally required for the Board of Health to hold a public meeting. However, the board feels that it is important to provide a public forum. Purpose of this hearing is to collect information and opinions. The board will not ask for a vote from the audience, nor will the board itself vote on the proposed regulations at this public hearing. The board will announce the meeting date at which they will discuss the vote on the proposed regulation. Any person wishing to make a comment tonight should sign in. Sign-in sheets located on the table. When addressing the board, you must identify yourself by name, address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. This will be strictly enforced. Be considerate of those persons speaking, whether you agree or disagree with them. You do not comment out of turn. Board members tonight will not engage in dialogue with commenters, but will accept their statements as testimony. The board will then schedule a meeting at which time a discussion and vote will be taken. No additional testimony will be considered at that time. I believe that's my hearing notifications. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our health agent and agents, and they will fill us in on tonight's meeting.
So today we're considering regulations for the keeping of chickens. I know we've been working at this process for about 6 to 8 months, and these are the current iteration of the regulations we have before us.
Okay. With that in mind, we'll take some comments from the public.
I would just open the public hearing.
I thought I already did that.
You open the meeting.
Meeting. So I guess we have to open the
Oh, I
public
gotta
hearing.
open the public hearing. All right, so I'll entertain a motion from the board to open the public hearing.
I make a motion to open the public hearing.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Meeting's open. Should we take public comments? Someone want to make a public comment?
I'm up and talk? Okay. My name is Tim Holm, 372 Whitney Street, and I appreciate the work the board has done and others to draft this bylaws. I can see there's been considerable effort put into this. But Northborough already has some bylaws that address this. So in chapter 244-020, responsibility of animal owners says this: no person shall allow an animal owned by him under his control to destroy or damage the property of another or to create a nuisance. And further on, it goes on to say in chapter 2, 44-120, the violations and penalties involved. Whoever violates the provisions of any of these foregoing regulations shall be subject to a fine of $50. Why is that not sufficient? I would like to hear from the board. And then if these bylaws are not effective enough, why not just amend that with the violations section in the proposed, which can specify first offense is a warning, second offense is a $50 fine, and then the subsequent offense is $100 per day for being out of compliance. So why not take that approach before the kind of the big bang approach? That's all I want to say.
Thank you.
Somebody on the computer has their hand up, so.
Hi, I'm Wendy Holm, 372 Whitney Street. He's got the legal stuff covered. I'm going to go to the emotional side. I love my chickens. I want to take a minute to tell you about my best friend, my sister. She's 12 months younger than me. She had undiagnosed Lyme disease for most of her life. By the time it was diagnosed, when she was 40, it was ravaging her body. The final 10 years of her life were absolutely miserable for her and everybody who loved her. The damage was severe. We suspect she was bit by a tick when she was 6 because she missed about 8 weeks of school at that time. Nobody really knows. But after that, she was never fully healthy. And then when her daughter was born, she was also never fully healthy. They learned years later that her daughter contracted Lyme from her in utero. Around age 40, the Lyme that had been hiding in my sister's cells began to fully rampage her body. She passed away 3 years ago, the week of Christmas, just a couple of weeks before turning 51. I miss her. Because of my sister, our family is very aware of Lyme, where it comes from, how it spreads, and the damage it can do to those we love. When we moved to Northborough, we found that we could not go out into our yard for a mere 5 minutes without a deer tick crawling on us. When our daughter was 2, I found an embedded tick in her. I was able to get her on antibiotics within 2 hours, but she still became extremely sick, and I always will worry for the rest of her life. I'm sure you can imagine the extreme fear this brought to me, as my husband and I would diligently check all our children daily. We even made the boys shave all their heads so we could make it easier. We sprayed our yards and the neighboring woods with permethrin. Permethrin causes cancer. We were choosing cancer for our children over Lyme because Lyme is horrible. With more research, we realized that we could simply get some chickens to help us with this tick problem, allowing us to only use the chemicals on our clothing when we go out in the woods. Over the past 8 years, we have found that sweet spot with the numbers of chickens that we require to keep the ticks away from the open part of our yard. That number, unfortunately, is significantly fewer than that 18 you guys are allowing. That's absurd. Our chickens are well away from any neighbors. We keep a very clean coop that does not attract bugs. It does not smell. Easy chemistry. Our chickens are very well cared for, but our chickens have a job to do. They cannot do that job unless we have enough chickens to cover our acreage. They cannot do that job unless they are free-ranging throughout our entire yard and into the woods. Your proposal is too restrictive and clearly does not understand chickens. In addition to the extreme restrictions on numbers, your proposal is cruel to the chickens. The language in your proposal states that the chickens must be in a coop and run space all day long. This is not healthy for the chickens and will cause illnesses, bugs, and more smell from the coop. Chickens were created to eat plants and bugs of a great variety. That healthy lifestyle cannot be recreated with the cruel housing that is in your proposal.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to comment?
Hi, everyone. Matthew Goodwin, 270 South Street, chicken owner. I have a few questions for the committee. The first, I think the town needs more context to this proposal. How many residents does this actually apply to? What is the cost associated with this to the town, in addition to the administrative time and effort to do inspections and paperwork? And then third, I think we should know if there has been any health incidents or hospitalizations that would warrant this type of bill. And my assumption here is that there's probably a limited number of people this would apply to. And it's going to add some operating expenses on top of the tax increases we've already seen. And big picture, I think this really discourages local community and resources. A lot of chicken owners are supplying eggs to a lot of families. As we all know, grocery prices are skyrocketing high. We have neighbors that we deliver eggs to during the season, up to 12 families. So it has an impact. My overall sense of this is that it's probably too much and a little bit of an overreach. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's Dan online.
Dan R.
Dan R. How about Dan R.?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks so much. Appreciate the time. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Again, this is Dan Rowe. I'm at 347 Green Street. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all. I've got a couple of points on going through this regulations. First one is the standards of care. I think item A and C related to animal cruelty probably should get removed, not because I'm against all types of animal cruelty, but I think that's covered in Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 272, Section 77. And I think that it's not well defined or described in our regulation here, so I think we should just refer to the Massachusetts definitions and regulations and not try to muddy the water there. Related to nuisance of noise and disturbances, I think that mandating hens be quiet during a time frame is kind of biologically unrealistic. They normally wake up at dawn and go to bed at dusk. And so if you're going to have a kind of quiet time regulation, you're likely going to need to adjust that based off the day-night cycle. So maybe something like 90 minutes after sunset, 90 minutes before sunrise, something to that nature, to be realistically not a loophole for anybody to complain, because otherwise, when chickens wake up, it's going to be before that 7 a.m. time, and they do, make some noise. Not a rooster, but even chickens do, or hens. On the inspections, I would suggest that we do kind of what other towns do with a by right, say 5 or less hens. You don't need an inspection, you don't need permits. It reduces the burden on the town for kind of the one chicken situation, but still helps us regulate the medium to larger size flocks. The other thing around the inspections is it doesn't clarify if those are scheduled or unscheduled, supervised or unsupervised. So if I'm a working resident that is not home during business hours that are defined as inspection hours, are they coming onto the property unsupervised, or do I need to take the day off from work to get the chicken coop inspected, things like that, that aren't addressed in the regulations. Another point was the coop square footage. If you look at the reference materials that is referenced, which are great in the document, a lot of them say I referenced the MDAR best management practices, which say 1.5 square feet per hen or greater. Or in the UNH documentation, it says 3 to 4. So our regulations are kind of well above what the other standards are. It also doesn't account for breed variation. So if I'm a keeper that has very small chickens, that size is very large, and it might be too small if I'm keeping very large chickens. So there's kind of better wordage that I think we could use versus the square feet to accommodate the various breeds and sizes. And then my final point was just on the clean and what is it, the clean and healthy definitions. We don't really define that here. We might want to leverage the MDAR, again, best management practices for this, but without clear definitions, enforcement is going to be at the discretion of the inspector and likely going to be inconsistent and lead to disputes around what is or is not clean. I am an advocate for very clean and sanitary conditions, so I'm not saying that we remove that, but just using or referencing existing definitions for those things so that we ensure that it is a consistent and enforceable policy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dan.
Greetings, my name is Bilal Hamaidan. I reside at 15 Edmonds Way, and I have lived in Northborough for 30 years. Although I have called this town home for 3 decades, it is not my town, or anyone's alone. It belongs to the roughly 16,000 kind-hearted residents who call it home. If I have a problem with one neighbor, or even a few, it is not appropriate to involve the entire town. Changing townwide rules over a personal dispute would be selfish and counterproductive. We are gathered here tonight because we fear that a handful of individuals are threatening the rights of the whole community. Northborough was founded on a right to farm ethos, whereas neighboring towns have pursued a more densely populated suburban development model. Having several private farms, it seems incongruous for Northborough to adopt stricter chicken keeping limits, for example, than Westborough. Westborough permits 50 chickens on a 1 to 2 acre property, while Northborough's Board of Health is proposing a limit of 12 chickens. When my wife and I first sought to keep chickens, we reached out to the town hall, and we were told there were no existing rules regarding keeping chickens or having roosters. We then consulted our abutting neighbors. The response was unanimously positive. We too have tick problems. And one neighbor, one house over, even asked us to let our chickens graze on his property to help control the ticks and fertilize his lawn. And I actually have to walk the chickens over there because they don't go that far. So I walk with them, and then at the end of the day, I actually walk them back to their coop. So, I mean, I have questions about will our chickens be grandfathered in? We don't have them fenced off, they're free range, or will we have to go through the process of seeking variances to keep the chickens we are already heavily invested in? As far as keeping roosters, based on personal observation, hens can be louder than roosters and are often even confused with the roosters crowing. Hens vocalize throughout the day to encourage laying, while roosters typically crow at sunrise. Not during the early morning helicopter flyovers between 1 and 3 a.m., or the nighttime truck brake noises from the I-290-495 interchange, or the howling coyotes on their hunt that already disturb the neighborhood in the middle of the night. It seems odd that we live accustomed to neighborhood noise pollution, but decide to pick on the brief and well-timed crows of a rooster. Our roosters improve flock genetics, aid in managing broodiness, and produce fertilized eggs for the local elementary school's second-grade chick hatching project, now operating in its 4th consecutive year. We use our own fertilized eggs because it yields higher hatch rates than sourcing eggs from other farms. We also trade fertilized eggs with nearby chicken owners, enhancing genetic diversity and fostering agricultural cooperation. If noise is the primary concern, zoning or the restrictions would be more sensible. Roosters should be discouraged in dense downtown areas, but in rural areas in our town, such as near Mr. Stone's farm, residents should already expect to deal with farm animals and farm animal noises. This town is a farming community. Anyone moving here should understand that animals and animal noises are part of that lifestyle. And if you dislike the farming character of this town, it's not up to 1 or 2 people to change. The town belongs to all of us. So we respectfully would ask the board to conduct a comprehensive community survey and properly assess the burdens these regulations would impose on existing chicken tenders. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ree Moyes, and 15 Edmonds Way. I think my husband said enough. I'm just here to support that we've had chickens for 6 years, or 6+ years. And even my daughter asked to come along because she was like, Mama, are they gonna make us get rid of our chickens? I was like, no, we had them actually during COVID. And because during that time, we, like you remember, we weren't allowed to go anywhere, and that was like our project. And they did become our pets, and they did become our babies. One point I wanted to add was, under the general requirements, letter J, chickens must come from Salmonella pylorium certified clean flocks. The only one point I wanted to ask there is, we get a lot of broody hens, and a lot of our hens, every year, we get 2 to 3 hens that sit on eggs for the 21 days, and then they hatch chicks. What will happen to those chicks, because technically they won't be certified, or they will not come from such places that you guys are proposing. So what will happen to said chicks? So this will be my only question for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else waiting? No, okay.
Hi, Rose McHugh, 376 Whitney. So I'm here because I think the proposed regulations, they are well-intentioned, but they're significantly more restrictive than what neighboring towns require, and they would effectively prevent most Northborough residents from keeping even a small flock. The Mass General Laws, Chapter 111, Section 31, give local Board of Health the authority for reasonable health regulations, and several sections impose zoning-style restrictions, setbacks, structural size rules, flock limits that go beyond health protection and function more as land use control. The regulation states it's intended to enable responsible small-scale agriculture, yet many provisions effectively prohibit it on small and mid-sized lots through setbacks, flock limits, and structural requirements. As far as the general requirements, they're just too restrictive. Existing zoning setbacks were never designed for small animal structures. Applying them here makes many standard-sized lots ineligible. The no noise disturbance between 10 and 7. Hens are naturally quiet at night. This requirement is subjective and duplicates the town's general noise bylaws. Setback from abutter dwellings. The 75-foot setback is one of the most restrictive in the region. Most lots under half an acre cannot comply. As far as the standards of care, the minimum space requirements of 4 square feet, these exceed many recognized best practice guidelines and do not accommodate professionally built, pre-built coops, forcing unnecessary expansions or financial burden. The manure storage limit, an arbitrary volume cap that penalizes gardeners who responsibly compost seasonally. Odor and runoff are already covered under the nuisance and health enforcement. As far as the flock size caps, limiting households to 4 to 6 hens prevents families from achieving meaningful egg supply. And the rooster limitation, I'll just add on to that as well. I have 0.9 acres, so I wouldn't be allowed to have a rooster. I currently have a rooster, and my rooster has actually saved my hens from hawks. We've had a bear attack. Without that rooster, I probably wouldn't have any hens left. The permit requirements really just are an excessive burden, requiring a plot plan showing structures, septic system, wetlands, abutters, requires written plans for manure, feed, and pest management for every applicant. Annual renewals, fees, and potential hearings create unnecessary administrative and financial barriers without improving health outcomes. Is that my time?
No?
Okay, sorry. I mean, I just have a lot of bullet points written, but so this draft regulation goes far beyond addressing actual public health risks. It creates barriers that would prevent most residents from keeping hens responsibly. A more balanced approach would focus on the nuisance-based enforcement rather than prescriptive design rules, and would align with successful models used in neighboring towns like Westboro would be a good example. And I'll just add on to the chickens, you know, if they have to stay in the coop or in the run, it's really strict and far beyond what's needed for the public health, and does no favors to the health of the chickens. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shane Goodwin. I live at 270 South Street. My husband already came up and made points, and I think everybody's had a lot of great points. There was just a couple other things that I wanted to say. As far as the number of chickens, looking side by side with the Westboro requirements and the Northborough requirements proposed, theirs has a clear scaling up. I don't know exactly where the numbers came from in the Northborough proposed document, but at least in the Westboro one, you can actually like do the math. It scales up accordingly per acreage. And in addition, as far as keeping hens, my husband and I don't keep roosters, but with our hens, we are letting them age out and just die naturally because we don't use our chickens for meat. We're using them for eggs. So for us, it would be really difficult to stay within the proposed number of chickens and still be able to maintain the level of eggs for our family and for our neighbors that we're providing eggs to if we're not allowed to increase our flock past 12 chickens. Because, I mean, we're under 3 acres. So realistically, if I had a flock that I got all at once, they would all age out at the same time of laying eggs about. And then instead of being able to keep those chickens, I'd be forced to either get them off of my land, give them to somebody who will use them for meat, or just sit and wait for them all to die in order to be able to get eggs again. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Carrie Thornton. Carrie Thornton.
Who?
Carrie Thornton.
Carrie? Why don't I say?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Carrie Thornton Genova, 147 Davis Street. A lot of the points that I was going to make have already been mentioned, so I will try to be brief. I also love my chickens. I have 4 chickens. I have an acre of land, so I could probably easily fit within these regulations. I do feel like these regulations are very restrictive. I feel like it goes against the spirit that this town was based on. I am not from Northborough. I grew up in Needham. When my husband and I were choosing where to live, we specifically looked for towns that had a farming spirit, because any of our future children, we wanted to raise them in an area where they could see farm to table, where they could see the cycle of life. We have 4 chickens right now, and they are named and they are loved and they will live out their lives with us. My concern is not for my chickens, because as I said, even though I'm finding this restrictive, with an acre, I think I could make it work. My concern is for the numerous people in this town who have less than an acre, who have coops and flocks that would be in violation of what you guys have proposed. And I fully support your work. I think you guys are being stuck in a hard place right now, trying to satisfy many people. But what about the families who have a coop that is within 15 feet of their border, or within 75 feet of their neighbors, because they don't have as much land as some of us do, or who have a rooster? I don't have a rooster, but for many people, their chickens are like pets. I mean, again, my chickens have names. Some of them are 8 years old, and even though they're not producing as much, they will live out their lives with us because we consider them like family. What about those who would be in violation? I don't see much language in here for grandfathering in established coops. As I said, my chickens are many years old. They've been around for longer than this current conflict. I find this to be a little restrictive, and I do find it to not be within the spirit of the town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Mary Beth Costello, 42 Washington Road. I've grown up in this town since I've been 5, so 43 years. I'll say that the town has changed a lot since I've grown up, and not necessarily for the better. I loved growing up in this town, the small town feel, the farms. We would go picking at Tuga's farm. We would go to Bavarian's farm, Davidian's farm. That was just what we grew up doing. My dad was an avid gardener. We always had a garden. We were always trying to support ourselves. He had 4 kids. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and at the time, one person working. We made it work, but it was definitely farm to table. That's how we supported ourselves. I am a chicken owner. I love my chickens. They are my pets. They all have names. My son actually name them all. They will live out in our yard until they go. I don't plan on having them go off because they can't lay any eggs anymore. That's not what we're doing. But in order to sustain eggs for myself, for my brother and my sister's family, I need to be able to bring in some more chickens. I need to bring in a couple, maybe every year, every other year, so that as the flock grows older, the new ones come up as well. I also have researched in other towns around us, and I'm just curious about where the numbers that you got for this came from. They are very restrictive and very small. Westboro was brought up a couple of times. That's one I looked at. I've looked at other towns around us as well. Sorry, I'm not a great public speaker. Sorry. So I also question, because in other towns, there's reflections about birds in general and not just chickens. This is very focused on chickens, which just makes it feel like it is a targeted thing. I have neighbors that have around me, they've never once complained to me about my chickens. I've asked them, I've said, oh, I'm so sorry they were so noisy today. Now, I would hope that being in the type of neighborhood I grew up in, which is on the same street that I grew up on actually, just right down the street, that my neighbors would come over if there was a problem and say something. That is the small town feeling that we grew up in, right? So if there is a problem or a complaint, I would hope that they would come speak to me first before it got to something that was going to go through the whole town. So I'm concerned about where this is stemming from. You know, is it one or two small things and now it's affecting all of us? And clearly there's a lot of chicken families in this town. We all love our chickens. We take care of them. There's health questions and concerns about the chickens and the risks. I would like to reinstate the Lyme disease as well. My father almost died from Lyme disease. So for me, having my chickens in the yard, eating up the ticks that are not going on me, and my children are older now, but still my son also had gotten Lyme disease as well. But now I have the chickens in there eating up those ticks. Oh, that's that. No. Okay, sorry. They're natural pest and weed control, right? We don't have to put pesticides down. I also have a dog. I don't want to put down chemicals in my yard to hurt my dog, you know, and neighbors have dogs as well. We don't want that in our yard, so I'd rather do it in a more natural way. They are also good for taking wastes, so we're not putting as much waste into our huge trash mounds that are piling up in our landfills. Instead, I get to feed those scraps to my chickens. Not only do they help my chickens, but they help us and they help the environment as well. And I just wanted to also just bring in that grandfather clause idea as well. There's a lot of families in the town that have chickens. So what is the proposed? Because these limitations basically would say that I couldn't have all my chickens. I've set them back. We also have a coop, a run. They're in there, but I also have a fenced-in backyard. So when the weather is nice and it's sunny, I let them out in our fenced-in backyard. They're not going anywhere else. It's like an extra run for our chickens. So I'm just concerned about the strictness of these regulations, and I thank you so much for listening to me.
Cassandra's on the,
Cassandra? No, that's been up there. Yeah.
Am I on?
You're on.
Okay, thank you. So I'm 357 Church Street, Northborough. And I'm not really sure. I wanted to say that I also called a year ago, and I was told there were no restrictions for chickens on properties in Northborough. So I'm not sure how this all came about, but I wanted to just speak for and favor of the chicken. My family had a turkey farm, 1948 they started. And my father had a dairy farm, and he's since left. But I live in Westboro. I own the property in Northborough now, and it's really shocking. I didn't know the bylaws. To hear what Westboro is able to have compared to Northborough is shocking. You would think it would be the other way around. I don't know, for those of you who know both of the towns. And then as far as the ticks, as far as any environmental side effect, the chickens, they help. When I go over there just to sit, when my father, he'll come up during the summer, I have to check my whole body. I've had them on my head, and I'm sitting, I won't go near the grass. I sit like in front of the barn where there's dirt, just so I don't have a tick on my body. Anyway, I was hoping to move there and have chickens. And I just want to speak for everybody else who's in favor. It's a pretty big ask to have people not to keep their livelihoods going for their mental health as well. So that's it.
Thank you, Cassandra.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have anything to add?
Hello, I'm Carter Brannon. I live at 22 Sherlin Drive. I had a few questions and things that I was not clear about when I was reading the regulations. I will say, I mean, I know probably most people who are here are critical of these, but I do appreciate the work that you put into this. I think there are a large portions of this that are fairly reasonable, and with some amendments, I think most people will be okay with these. But just to add just a few comments that haven't been brought up. During the first authority section, I was just wondering if it would make sense to also include reference to the authority granted by our zoning bylaw 7-05-20 D2 that explicitly gives the Board of Health the authority to regulate, to impose some regulations on agriculture under 5 acres. Regarding the purpose, section B, where it talks about the stuff from the Mass General laws, as I may be wrong about this, but my understanding is that those limits apply to areas not zoned for agriculture, which all of the residential districts in Northborough are zoned for agriculture. So I'm a little bit unclear on how commercial agriculture would be defined and understood based on this bylaw. Other things, I mean, some of the setbacks versus the lot size, I feel like, especially when we're talking half-acre, quarter-acre properties, the setbacks would kind of make those impossible. And so I'm not sure why not either just pick either the setbacks or the limit. Those would make more sense to me. I do think the maximum number of chickens is excessively small, especially the jump from half an acre to 3 acres. If this is about how much space is appropriate for chickens, I'd expect that to be going progressively between half acre and 3 acres. Or if it's just about concern of who could take care of these chickens, I think that would kind of create a different question that this bylaw is not trying to handle. I understand the desire to restrict roosters to flocks that are larger, for example, over 18 acres. But if you were to reduce the size of it that 18 chickens would be allowed on, I would assume the roosters would also go along to smaller lots with that. When I was at the meeting in October, I believe that some of the town staff were saying that an permit fee was not necessary, that the permit was mostly to keep track of the chickens as opposed to needing a fee. And I think that removing the need for the fee would probably be more acceptable to people in the town. Yeah, I think those are the main comments I had. I'll also add if we're trying to restrict roosters and chickens and stuff like that, considering one of our prominent landmarks is a big statue of a rooster over on West Main Street, I think it would be very ironic to not want and expect roosters in town. I also will say that I think this is major changes to the land use of the town. I understand the Board of Health has some authority to regulate agriculture and regulate animals. However, if this may be bordering on a major change, and it would make more sense to go to town meeting or have a town-wide vote on some of these rules. My last comment is, I think the town, I'm surprised that we do not have an agricultural commission in this town. And if people who are at this meeting, I would think the Board of Health, as a member of the planning board, I think it would be beneficial if we had an agricultural commission. It would take probably a year or two to actually create that, but if people are interested in that, I wanted to bring up that idea. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is that it?
This is M. Powell.
M.
M. Powell.
Oh, M. Powell.
Hello, am I on?
You're on.
Hi, I'm Mike Powell. I'm at 360 Whitney. My main comment is that I do not keep any chickens. I might someday, but it's not something I do now. A number of my neighbors have spoken. And I'm speaking because I'm not someone who keeps chickens, but it seems from everything I've read and I looked at the regulation that this is a solution in search of a problem. Of the noises I've heard around town and here around my house, chickens are not even in the top 5 or 10 of the ones that have bothered me. I hear coyotes, I hear other wildlife, I hear trains, I hear traffic. I have occasionally heard chickens. It's not bothersome. I've never had a chicken in my yard. I knew what I was getting into when I moved to Northborough. I live north of 290. I believe it's the Residence B district. Their lots are all over 1 acre. And someday I might wish to keep chickens. I actually did look at that sort of thing when I moved to town to see what those kinds of regulations were. The restriction on roosters and the restriction on where chicks can be sourced from seems like a way to force people to get their chickens only from corporate sources as opposed to within the community, which seems counterproductive to a lot of our goals in terms of local agriculture and community. And it seems like there's just a tremendous amount of administrative burden in these regulations for someone who wants to keep even a very small number of chickens. So I hope that if regulations are pursued, that they will be looked at again. When I read them at first, to be honest, my first thought was, is this a regulation for Newton? And particularly, I live north of 290, like they're applying this to all zoning districts. They're not, saying this is the downtown district or the high density districts. There's lots that are much larger than mine in Northborough, and this seems like a very broad brush being painted across the entire town. So, thank you.
Thank you. I think that's it. Does anyone else have any comments? Well, with that in mind, we appreciate everybody's testimony tonight regarding what's going on. It has not, strangely enough, it's not been an easy process, and still working on it, and your comments have been heard and will be considered. And again, with all regulations, you're trying to weigh one means against the other means to try and figure out, come to a common understanding. We've heard here, isn't there anyone here who doesn't like chickens? Nobody.
No one showed up.
No one here. So I appreciate it, but, and we're going to keep working to try and find something that everyone can accept, and keep in mind that we're trying to take care of the chickens as well as our neighbors. So I'm going to ask that a motion to be made to close this hearing.
I make a motion to close the public
Someone
hearing.
will second it, please. And all those in favor? Okay, the public hearing is closed. And we'll go on with our business as far as the Board of Health is concerned.
Do you want to schedule the next meeting to discuss, continue the?
Yeah, let's schedule the next meeting.
So our regularly scheduled meeting would be in 2 weeks. I know that's a quick turnaround, so it's up to you if you want to do in 2 weeks or our next meeting in April.
March 10th.
It's too soon.
It's too soon.
Yeah.
So April.
14th. 14th.
April 14th?
April 14th.
Second Tuesday, yeah.
Yep.
That's good.
All right, so we'll continue the conversation then.
April 14th.
All right, so we'll have a meeting, our next meeting will be April 14th. And as always, the public is invited. We don't always have public comments. We try and keep it open. Anything else?
I don't think so.
All right, I will entertain a motion to close the Board of Health meeting.
I motion we end the meeting.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's closed. Thanks, everybody. Drive safe.